Thank you everyone who joined our event with Friba and Karina. Friba Rezayee is the first female Afghan athlete to participate in the Olympic Games. And Karina Menshikova is an IT expert and a member of Generation Ukraine. We are very happy to be here today to participate in this discussion that these two wonderful ladies will lead to talk about the women's rights in the times of war in Ukraine and in Afghanistan under the Taliban rule. So Friba and Karina, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and sorry again for the confusion with the time. I'm really happy to be able to moderate this discussion and have a conversation with a wonderful woman, Friba. I want you to just talk about yourself a bit and tell about whom you see as yourself and about your activism.
Thank you so much, Themis and Karina, for having me for this wonderful discussion and time. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be able to speak with you all today and in a conversation about Taliban, Afghanistan, and also Ukraine, because we are very well connected and we share the same pain. I was born and raised in Afghanistan in a small traditional Afghan Muslim family. So I'm Muslim, and but I came to Canada as a refugee. I call Canada home as well. I have dual citizenship, Canadian and Afghan. I represented Afghanistan at the 2004 Athens Olympic Games in Greece. And Greece was the first country where I saw the ocean for the first time. Because back in Afghanistan, we don't have ocean. We have rivers, we have lakes, but no ocean because it's a landlocked country. So I have beautiful memories of ocean and water in Greece. I lead a nonprofit organization now called Women Leaders of Tomorrow. We are based in Vancouver, Canada. I call myself a former Olympian and also human rights activist. Thank you.
And given this background of yours and current Olympics, I know that right now you're in Paris, where you were specifically invited, and just wanted to hear your thoughts on how the things are going there, because recently in some video on Instagram, I saw that this is the first Olympics where we finally reached the equilibrium, so to speak, and where 50% of women are represented in numbers. What's your opinion on current Olympic situation in Paris, especially given the controversies regarding France team being banned from wearing hijabs, though they have great majority of Muslim community in general in the country. So as a athlete, what is your stance on this and how the general things are going in Paris right now?
Thank you. So yes, I'm in Paris at the moment. I was invited by the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, to come watch the Olympic opening ceremony in person and also meet her network and dignitary guests to advocate about women's rights to sport and also to speak about Afghanistan and the current situation of women's rights to sport. So yes, and I came back to the Olympics exactly after 20 years. So when I went to watch the opening ceremony in person, to be very honest, it was very emotional. I got emotional and mixed feelings because, of course, I love my country. Afghanistan is a beautiful country, and I that's my identity. I'm an Afghan more than anything else. And when I saw the Afghan team entering the opening ceremony as the first country, because Afghanistan comes first AF, the tradition is that Greek team always comes first because that's the Olympic tradition. And then they put the refugee team. And then as soon as the countries started alphabetically by the French language, so Afghanistan was first. When I saw Afghanistan's team, it was emotional because it's a very different Afghanistan than I represented and I when I participated, because I went to Athens Olympic Games directly from Afghanistan. It was a time that women were allowed to play sport in Afghanistan and represent Afghanistan globally. Gender equality and women's rights were not near actual equality, but certainly we were making improvement. Women's rights were too, sport was making improvement, and at least we were allowed to play sports in Afghanistan back then. And now the Taliban have banned sport for women and girls in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan has 6 athletes representing Afghanistan at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. 3 of them are men, 3 of them are women. And all these 3 female athletes came from exile and represented Afghanistan from the exile. And none of the female athletes came from Afghanistan. And only one male athlete came from Afghanistan, and he was supported and selected by the Taliban regime. He actually just a few days ago tested positive for doping and sport of judo, so he's banned from the Olympics now. And it's a very difficult time now because as much as I wanted Afghanistan to be at the Paris Olympic Games, but it's not exactly Afghanistan, and because the Taliban also taking part in the Olympic Games because they sent a male athlete, but the female athletes, they're doing well. They, especially the 2 cyclists, they are sisters. They did very well, and I'm very proud of them. They also spoke about women's rights at the Olympic Games. And the team is receiving a lot of reception, a lot of support from the International Olympic Committee and their network. So that's really good. They're receiving a lot of attention on social media as well. That's really nice. I'm also very happy to see that Russia has been banned from the Olympic Games, Russia and Belarus, and none of the athletes from these 2 countries are allowed to come to the Olympic Games under their flag and also under their national anthem. But 11 athletes are participating from Russia and Belarus under the neutral athlete. So I am very grateful to the International Olympic Committee for banning Russia, because when I met with the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, she's a very strong woman and very strong feminist. And she is one of those people who takes a side immediately. She knows what's right, what's wrong. And she immediately took side of Ukraine, of course. And she said to me specifically that she has been in contact with the International Olympic Committee, and she told them that she will not allow any Russian athletes in her city under the Russian flag and anthem while the Ukrainian athletes are walking around and participating in the Olympic Games. And she said the same thing to me about the Taliban. And she held my hand and she said that I'm on your side, and I want to make sure that the Afghan female athletes have access to safety and to sports, and they can play sport with dignity. So a lot is going on right now in Paris. A lot are happening. Um, I've been speaking about fair sports system for women and girls in Afghanistan because our National Olympic Committee has started collaborating with the Taliban, and there's no consistent system to select the athletes and allow athletes to represent Afghanistan. So it's becoming a little bit closed door decision, and the Afghan NOC is becoming an exclusive club, So public like myself, even if I'm former Olympian, I don't have access to that information, how they're selecting the athletes and who these athletes are. So those are concerning areas, and I'm constantly meeting with the International Olympic Committee members, with their executive board members, to discuss this, to help them understand Afghanistan's situation better and how can they help female athletes. And speaking of hijab, as a Muslim woman, I must say that I believe that hijab should be optional. It's up to the individual woman if she wants to wear hijab or not. I am against the burqa, though, the full burqa from head to toe, because that is extremely misogynist. That's gender apartheid. It restricts women from movement, from mobility, from agility, because especially in hot weathers, that's very hot and it's extremely difficult to move with it. But when it comes to hijab at the Olympic Games, I'm very confused because there is no consistent system. So some athletes are allowed to wear hijab, some athletes are not allowed to wear hijab. For example, the Egyptian team, even the beach volleyball, they are wearing full hijab under very hot sun. So they are allowed, but some athletes are not allowed. That's very concerning because if there is no consistency in the system, it leaves up to the individual person to make that decision. And that puts the female athletes in a vulnerable situation because it's just up to one person. And if you make that person happy, he or she will be happy with you. You can wear hijab and you can be whoever you are. But if you don't, and then that does not rule on your favor. So I would love to see consistent culture and system in both, like with the Afghan athletes as well as the hijab when it comes to Olympic Games.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful insight, and it's about the current Olympics, because this part goes behind a bit people who are just watching it on television, and many things that are going on, like press conferences and stuff, is missed. We are just probably checking on how many medals one team got, who won what, but all these more like sport specifics stuff is hidden behind. So thank you so much. And what I think we could start talking about the general situation in Afghanistan, historical background, and interconnections between our two countries. Solely because if you think we are not connected by borders or traditions much, however, we have a lot of like common history, so to speak. And what I think for us, what Ukrainian women was partly, I would say, an introduction to civil rights movements among women for your country was very stressful and decisive moments. And what I want to talk about is Afghanistan war. I know that before the war, the situation of women's rights there was a bit better than before, which is a completely mirror situation for Ukraine, for which Afghanistan war was one of the, it is, so to speak, one of the nails in the coffins of the USSR, and where we started actually civil movements and got more freedom. So can you share with us a bit of history here behind how women were perceived in Afghanistan before the Afghanistan war, what happened during the USSR invasion, and what happened next?
Yes, absolutely. So I was born in 1987. So I was a child, and before I was born, a Soviet occupied Afghanistan, and they invaded Afghanistan. So Soviet ruled Afghanistan for almost 25, 24 years. So Afghanistan was completely run by them, by USSR, from early 70s to late 80s. And when I was born, my father worked at the American embassy during the Soviet war and during the Soviet occupation. So it's a very dangerous time given the political situation between USA and USSR, right in Afghanistan, because they both were fighting for the same goal to be leader of Afghanistan. So I was born at that time, and my father tells me that he would see, like, make food for the American diplomats at the American embassy, and then he would see that Russian tanks were roaming around. So during the Soviet built a couple of big infrastructure that we are still using in Afghanistan. For example, they built the silo where they get all the bread. They also built the polytechnic. They also fixed a lot of roads, and they also fixed the Soviet fixed the transportation, but only in big cities. So when they built the polytechnic, Afghan women and girls were allowed to go to school. And on the campuses, women were allowed to wear even mini skirts. And there are so many pictures on the internet. If you Google Afghanistan during Soviet, women wore mini skirts, and burqa and hijab were not mandatory. And they went to school. They studied technical studies, STEM, technology, art, anything they wanted that. And women also drove transit buses, which was very highly unusual for a woman to have those jobs, because those jobs were very just for men only. So, but that was only in big cities, in the centers of the cities. And the Soviets also built Makroyan. Is like a big, huge complex apartments where people could live, and people are still using that. So during those era, women had access to transportation, healthcare, um, education, employment. The only good thing that we have the legacy from the USSR is the women's rights, because Soviet wanted, like there was no gender, like everybody has to work, everybody has to income, has to have an income, everybody has to contribute in the community, like communism based society. So they did that, and women were improving because women had access to education. And a lot of people also studied in Russian, especially the technical part. It was also at that time that a man from Afghanistan went to the moon for the first time from the help of Soviet. So of course it was Soviet, and Soviet was very brutal towards Afghanistan, towards Afghans. So the Soviet also banned religion from being practiced by the Muslims, by the Afghans. In Afghanistan, the Soviet had a very strong resistance. They called themselves the Mujahideen. They were the guerrilla fighters with the AK-47 on their shoulders on the mountains. They called themselves the jihadists and also the Mujahideen. So towards the 90s, the guerrilla fighters kept fighting the Russian with the help of USA, and Soviet collapsed in Afghanistan in 1999. As you said, that was the nail in the coffin for Soviet in 1999. And we had the Gorbachev as our president. So when the Soviet collapsed, the civil war began because of the Mujahideen, because the Mujahideen group was collecting a lot of weapons, collecting a lot of weapons, and they were becoming more powerful and more powerful with the help of USA. And then that led to, we also had presidential area, because we had the first president, Dawood Shah, who was like soon after, soon during the Soviet, actually during the Soviet, he was our president, and we have many presidents until the civil war broke. Civil war broke in late 90s, around the same time that the Soviet collapsed. So the Civil War was for a few years, and during the Civil War, women's rights were completely forgotten. Nobody cared about women's education, about healthcare, about women's safety, because everybody was in a survival mode. And I remember that my mother had a big house. We had a big family house, and in the big family house, we also had a big basement. So whenever there was like rockets, there were like attack, or like direct shootout at the alley. So we women and children would get together, and my mother would send everybody in the basement to seek safety, so we are not caught in the fight with the bullets, and so on. So that was the Civil War. The Civil War was brutal. It completely destroyed Afghanistan civil society, human rights, education, even infrastructure, because of the local war and the rocket bombs, guns. They completely destroyed the roads as well. The houses were broken. Even a rocket landed on our house, but we survived the attack, the fall, and then it became the Taliban. The Taliban came in power in 1994, and it was in 1995 when they took over the capital, Kabul, Afghanistan, and the Taliban promised peace and stability because they wanted to end the civil war. And the Taliban came back, and as you know, the Taliban in '90s, they were extremely brutal. They were like what the ICE is doing right now. They had public execution at the sports stadium, so all the graphic stuff they did, and women's rights were completely destroyed under the Taliban regime because they banned schools, employment, education, and sports for women. And the Taliban ruled until 9/11 happened, until 9/11, and then USA invaded Afghanistan soon after the 9/11. That was when Afghanistan was recovering from the civil war, from the Taliban war, and the US war. That was when Afghanistan was also getting ready to send a team and a delegate to the 2004 Olympic Games. And I was selected to be part of the delegate and part of the team to represent Afghanistan at the Olympic Games. And then USA was in Afghanistan until 2020, August 2021, until recently, until the Taliban came back. So we have a lot of history of Soviet, American war, civil war, domestic war, and also international.
Yeah, so what in your country led to even more brutal regime and consequences in general for our country contributed a lot to independence in general, and actually it created, as our famous feminist and literary critic Solomia Pavlichko told, one of the most powerful women's movement in Ukraine, which is the organizations of soldiers' mothers, which were actually in late 80s very concerned about young recruits being sent to Afghanistan and eventually never returning back alive. And they started the movement to demand young men who were not who were drafted for just their regular service to serve these years directly in the country, like in the petty republic, not like, for example, if the recruit came from Ukraine, that it would mean that his service would have to be in Ukraine, not to go somewhere. For example, in Afghanistan or in other parts of like USSR. And then they were they were advocating a lot for this purpose and actually gained what they asked. And the recruitment kind of started to take place and people were not sent in the end of the war from the republics to like fight wars in general. So that was a big push. However, everyone thought that maybe it would be good because this women's movement, soldiers' mothers, gained support from small groups of women that were already engaged in like civil rights movements, in independence movement, and at some point there was a possibility to have more women represented. For example, in the next shortly before the Soviet Union collapse, we held kind of election, first like fair election, so to speak, in the Soviet regime, where the opposition parties were allowed to take part and actually gain seats in the government of like Ukrainian, Soviet Republic, and other republics. And after that, it also led to the fact that these very people were the ones who voted for independence and created us normal republic. If we talk about the next events after the Taliban, after the Afghan war, when the Taliban came, were there any like specific movements that women were trying to to make, or I know that a lot of things were banned, but for example, in a book which is called Sewing Circles of sorry, it's a quite a long name, but General Christina, the author is Christina Lamp. She was a reporter from Afghanistan for some time. We will add this book in our like reading recommendations, which we will get later on. She was writing about small sewing circles that women in Afghanistan were making as a cover for continuing their educational activities. Maybe you've heard something about that from your older relatives or like friends and their parents, something like that. Or maybe you have some other inspiring stories about women trying somehow to go against the Taliban, not eventually maybe directly, but in some very creative and thoughtful ways.
Yes, absolutely. So women always play an important role during the war, but their names are not heard and their voices are not heard because when it comes to war, the first thing that we picture men soldiers going to the war, but there are many, many women who help to fight in the war as well, and there are so many women who actually go in direct combat. During the Afghanistan war, there weren't many women who went to direct combat, but in Ukraine right now, there are a lot of female soldiers. And we don't hear their names as much as we hear about male soldiers. For example, I was watching this documentary about a young soldier called, his nickname is Darwin, who expert of drone and attacking the Russian tanks by drone. So, yeah, and during the 1990s, when the Taliban ruled, many Afghan women held and had secret schools for women and girls in the basements. So because the Taliban have imposed burqa on women, so the girls would hide their books in a grocery bag, and with a male family member, they would pretend with the burqa that they're going to grocery shopping. So the Taliban were not suspecting that they were actually going to classrooms. So they would go inside teacher's house or family friend's house in the basement. They would study for hours. They would study math, science, and their subject of their choice. So right now, women are doing the same thing. It's everything has gone backward, and everything is back to 1990s. The only thing that is different now is the internet. And I have a very specific story I would like to share with everyone during the Civil War and how women resisted the war. So in 90s, there was also a strong resistance from the people and also from women and girls against the Taliban regime. It's still the same thing. There's a strong resistance. My family is one of the resistance against the Taliban. So during the Civil War, imagine the electricity was completely destroyed. No electricity. Gas was very expensive. And the families, including my family, they had this house that built by mud. And because some part of the city was destroyed more than other parts, some during the Civil War actually and the Taliban, where some areas were attacked more than the other area because of the ethnic group of people. Like if people, a certain group of ethnic groups lived in a specific part of the city, if they were the minorities, they would be attacked more by the Taliban and during the Civil War. So many of my family members and family, the relatives of my parents, they came and stayed with us in our house because the area was not as damaged as the rest of the cities. So imagine in a house, it had many rooms, and we had a big living room. Imagine in a house, 25, 30 women, all facing war on daily basis. So their husbands and sons and brothers would go to war to fight the Taliban and fight in the civil right. And these men who went to war, they were just defending their family members and their community and the neighborhood. They had no other purpose to fight any other the Taliban. So my in the evening, the only light that we had, there was one of those hurricane lights that people will use for camping. You put oil in it, and it has the thing, you burn it. So we would put that in the middle of the in the center of the living room, and all the women would gather. And my older sister, because she went to school during the Soviet, because the schools were open for girls, as I mentioned, so she was literate, so she was able to read and write. So she would read letters and books to these women and girls gathered around the light for hours. And that was like our TV. That was the fire in the center. We everybody gathered around, and that inspired. That was entertainment, and also keep things going, and also sort of education, because my sister had a very good vocabulary in the local language, and these women would ask about what this specific letter mean in the language, and she would explain. So that was one of our biggest memory that we had. So that was also a strong resistance from the people. And my mother and so many other women have helped so many soldiers during the Civil War to survive, help them equip with so many other things, care, love, and also they worked for them as the people who could bring supplies, because there are certain checkpoints that they would not search women. They would not search women. They were only, the Taliban would only search men. And so these women would gather in a family forum, and they would take weapons, other stuff to the resistance group. And so, yeah, they were also a big part of the victory as well. And right now, everything, as I mentioned, has gone back to 1990s. But there are many schools. We also have online education system for women and girls in Afghanistan. It's called Afghanistan Learns Online. This is a program for the girls who did not finish their high schools, so they can study grade 11 and 12 online through our education system, so they can complete their high school, and after that they can apply for scholarships or for college outside Afghanistan.
That's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing this story, especially since it is directly connected with your family, and a great example of resilience and resistance in such dreadful times in general. As you mentioned, here women, like since we've grown a lot in terms of feminism, women's rights right now. There are a lot of women who are actually going and they are serving in the army, but at the same time that they are, like one of them said, they are working against two enemies. One is Russia, and the second one is this old archaic system in the army, because while right now we have I think the largest share of women in the army compared to like even most of the countries of NATO, I think there is still a lot of different cultural perceptions about the women, what their place in the war is. And among the current achievements, as far as I know, we definitely have one woman that fully completed the training for special units in the army, like special operations, which was practically closed field. And she got there like all by herself without any like demanding the rights. She endured training, the physical, all different physical exams and stuff. But I mean, as a woman athlete, you know that what women can endure, I think. Not to mention how many things women right now were doing at the start of the war, when there was no understanding who from men can go out, and practically all the cars that were required on the battlefield at some point were driven from Europe mostly by women, because it wasn't clear how the men can go out and go back to the country. So basically they were taking some car from Europe, drove to the border, crossed the border, gave it to further to men or to women who could drive to the battlefields where the car was necessary. So I have, for example, a friend who was doing such a thing. She got her driver license, I guess, a couple of years ago, but was pretty sure in herself and in the time of the need. You've mentioned several times that you were happy that Russian athletes were banned. We also were very happy. I mean, it's better even not to let them compete, because regardless of the flag, whether they compete under the flag or not, the Russian propaganda uses them anyways. Like, here you go, those are ours anyways. And I know that given the USSR history in Afghanistan, Russia is still a threat. Not just to Ukraine, not just to Europe, but all over the world. They have their own interests, and they started to collaborate with the Taliban. Even with Taliban being their high-profile speakers on some of the economic forums recently, which their dictator was promoting so much. And I know you have very specific views that how dangerous it is and how it can impact our war. So if you can share with us your thoughts, that would be awesome.
Yes, absolutely. I must mention that when I heard that the Russian athletes and Belarusians will be allowed to play under neutral athlete, I was shocked, disappointed, because how can you be neutral if you're supporting a regime, if you're supporting Putin, because some of those athletes did post pro-Putin things and pro-war on their social media after being allowed to the Olympic Games. So the mayor of Paris fought really hard against it. I was in a meeting with the executive at a conference where one of the executive board of IOC, where she said that the Russians will be allowed under neutral athletes. The room was very angry with her. The room was very angry, and she was not welcome there just for saying that, because we said the definition of neutral. And I said to the executive board as well, and she did not like this. And I said, Madam Kloster, when it comes to Russia and Taliban, we are not talking about normal politics, because the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, says that if we play politics, we have to exclude many, many national Olympic committees and many, many countries. But I told them very boldly, confidently in a conference that when it comes to Russia and Taliban, we are not talking about normal politics. We are talking about tyranny. We are talking about the regimes and the dictatorship who have violated human rights and the Olympic Charter, and these people who have started war against innocent people. And when it comes to Taliban and Russia, so I do agree with you, Karina. Russia is extremely dangerous, and they're everywhere. Believe me, they're everywhere. So during the American occupation, during the American war in Afghanistan, um, the Russians never closed its embassy. And I even know where the embassy is. They kept low key, they kept low profile while the Americans were there. As soon as the Americans left and the Taliban took over, the embassy, the staff of the Russian embassy in Kabul, they came out. And just last year, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, he went and met the Taliban leaders and shook hands with the Taliban leaders. And Russia is investing in mines and minerals in Afghanistan right now, because Afghanistan is very rich in mines and minerals. We have lithium, we have copper, gold, and so many other things. So recently, Russia invested $6.5 million, and they're going to invest more. Right now, the Taliban regime is in a situation where in desperate need of financial support, of money, because the US government has froze $9.4 billion of Afghanistan at their bank in New York, and they're not going to give that money to the Taliban. So the Taliban are really desperate of money. So they are making deal with Russia and with China. Of course, none of those countries care about human rights and women's rights. So in addition to that, Russians in Afghanistan right now, with the help of Taliban, they're recruiting young, unemployed men from Afghanistan to fight for Russia against Ukraine. Because the economic situation is dire and desperate in Afghanistan, and a lot of people jobless, they need income to survive. So the Russians are taking advantage of those people's situation. They're paying them 2,000 to 3,000 US dollars a month to come fight for Russia. Some of them never go back home because they die in the war, and they are collaborating, and they're becoming more and more close friends because the Russians need the Taliban as their soldiers, supporters, whatever, however they want to use, and the Taliban needs Russians as one of the global powers, as a big supporter. So please don't get me wrong here. This is how some people's psychology in Afghanistan. Some people support Russia in Afghanistan because they see Russia as like a tough man, masculine, because it's a patriarchy culture. They like that. So they want to support that. And there's many collaborators of the Taliban who support Putin in Afghanistan right now because of Putin's attitude and behavior, because they say, oh, he's a very Russian man and he's very tough. So where does that leave the civil rights, women's and girls' rights? Nobody cares. And it's only getting dangerous, and it's only getting bigger and more risky right now, because I've been thinking about this a lot, Taliban and Russia. And I always say that, and I met one of the senators in Paris just a few days ago, and I talked to her very seriously that you as EU countries need to take this seriously, because Russia cannot win this war, because if Russia wins, it will set a precedent of bullying, tyranny, dictatorship, that war is a good thing. We should never let the war win. We should never let tyranny and dictatorship win, because that will impact the rest of the world, and it will influence and inspire the rest of the world. So that's what I would like to say about the Taliban and Russia.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And overall, it's all connected with, as you mentioned, hard, strong, masculine men. We can see it, that even in countries that have a great history of democracy and respecting human rights and stuff, like USA, where Trump just always has a good word for dictator like Vladimir Putin, saying that he is a tough guy and stuff. And until we live in the world where this is considered as a great image, and an image of power is something that is respected compared to the rule of law, we are going somewhere in completely wrong direction. Given our general experience, I mean, eventually I'm talking about Ukrainian and Afghan women, I think we can understand each other in some points, given our experience of wars in just recently in 21st century, in the end of 20th century. How you think we can collaborate, how we can support each other, and maybe you have some specific examples of in general interacting with Ukrainian women yourself, or with your friends, among your friends, for example. And let me answer the question in chat. Yes, so all we will be sharing the recording, so all good if you need to run something.
Yeah, really good question. There's so many ways we can collaborate, because at the end of the day, we have the same goal. We all are fighting for democracy and human rights and stability. There are many, many Afghan women who are storming this on the streets these days, showing resistance and protesting for their rights against the Taliban regime. And we started collaborating today. This is a really good start. I'm very happy and honored to say that I have a Ukrainian flag in my apartment. I always say that. We need to show support for each other. We need to stand up against the bullies and against the tyranny like Russia. I think if we connect more Afghan women with the women in Ukraine, we will understand each other even more, and we will realize that how close we are, how connected we are, that we are different. Well, definitely we can collaborate on women's sports. We can collaborate on women's education and communities. I would love to see that athletes from Ukraine, or talking with the female athletes from Afghanistan, or the male athletes as well, because they both were against the Taliban and Russian. I would love to see intellectual Afghans connecting with the intellectuals with the Ukraine community members. Same tactic, but different background. So everybody is connected with each other, and we are blessed with the technology now, with the internet. We can connect from anywhere on the world. For example, I'm happy to connect you with the girls from Afghanistan, and they would love to see girls from Ukraine, and they would love to speak with them and share their experience and conversations.
Thank you. I must say, in general to support like Ukrainian Afghan connection. Right now we have like a thoughts leader. She is a cultural lore. Oh my goodness, this is just non-translatable. I mean, she's trained as cultural critics and something like that. And she's very vocal in social media as a specialist in colonization and decolonization. Her name is Mariam Nayem, and she is half Ukrainian and half of Afghan descent because her father, he came to Ukraine as a refugee, during the Afghan war. And right now she's vocal about Ukrainian colonization and decolonization, and she's in the process of getting to know her Afghan part. So I think we will be hearing a lot also from her about that side of her identity. So this is just an example of our collaboration blended in one person, but I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of room for us all to develop relationships and friendships in different fields. And in the end, before we go to a Q&A, I wanted to ask you, like, there are a lot of books written by Afghan women about their experiences, and maybe you have your favorite one, or maybe you have a recommendation about some very strong memoirs or like prose written by Afghan women about Afghanistan or their fights for rights or practically anything that you like that is written by an Afghan woman would be a nice recommendation for all of us, I think.
Absolutely. I have 3 books in my mind that 2 of them are written by women, and one of them is by Afghan women, and one of them is written by a Canadian author, but it is about Afghan girl. I hope you haven't read them already, so I'm gonna write their names here. One is that the pearl who broke her shell by Nadia Hashimi. She's an Afghan woman, lives in Washington, D.C. area. Of course, the Kite Runner. So sorry, first of all, the books written by women. It was the Breadwinner. A Breadwinner by Deborah Ellis. She's a Canadian author. And of course, a very recent book. Have you heard about Afghan women's soccer team who left Afghanistan, and their team leader, Khalida Popal? She rescued the whole team to England and Australia. And she wrote a book about my beautiful sisters by Khalida Popal. This is very new. She recently launched it. Khalida Popal. Yeah, 3 books. And of course, any books by Khalid Hosseini, The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini, The Thousand Splendid Sun. Oh, sorry, I misspelled the Splendid Sun. Thousand Splendid Sun by Khalid Hosseini. These are really good books. They're also a bit heavy to read, but that's the reality. That's the truth in Afghanistan. And I'm happy to recommend more books as I remember.
Thank Thank you. I've heard a lot about the need to read The Kite Runner and Thousand Splendid Suns, and as well as the book by Nadia Hashimi. To others, never heard about that, but definitely now I should add it to the reading list. So I guess I hope our listeners too. And now I want to give the floor to the people. If you have any questions to Friba, feel free to unmute, ask and communicate, get something interesting for yourself.
So I can ask something since I don't see any hands raised. So my question would be to both of you, Karina and Friba. And I know that today, like these days, women in Afghanistan, they don't have, like, there are no women rights in Afghanistan. This is de facto, like the Taliban don't respect women. But in Ukraine, how do you think, Karina, that you can support like Muslims women rights in Europe that come from Afghanistan? I mean, there are so many open fields that someone can actually go and help. Like someone can say that I'm helping Ukrainians, another one can say I'm helping Afghans. But what I see most important, as something very important that combines everyone, is to support women's rights in Europe. As many women from Afghanistan also refugee to Europe, and the women from Ukraine again to Europe. So I think that if we don't make women's rights a default in Europe, we don't have hope to do that in Afghanistan.
Yeah, given the general tendencies of right nationalistic parties and their rise, and I'm not sure how we can, like, what we can do is to if you've heard, we kind of a multinational nation, and it's not about like having other Slavic brothers, so to speak, but we also have our own native Muslim people living on the territory of Ukraine. They basically should have lived in Crimea, but many of them are unable to because Crimea is occupied. So I guess as long as we support our local Muslim communities, it is also can impact the situation in Europe in general, because we consider ourselves as a part of Europe, and we need to not to tend to this very sentiment that is now raising against Muslims and people of color in general, like what we see in Poland, in Hungary, where the politicians are actually playing on the topic of refugees. And I think we should really support and get to know real Muslim communities, not and especially Muslim women, because there is a bit of a difference anyway between us, and we need to get their experiences for us to understand what it is to be, because when like European woman says you should all not stop wearing hijabs, it just I think a bit of populism, because who am I to decide this? This is not like something I know much from the perspective of Muslim woman, right? So I guess we need my general perception is the more we know, the better. The better we are equipped to fight narrative that offer easy solutions, and that's why we need to know our local Muslim culture and eventually the culture of other communities. That's why I'm here to talk with Friba, and you're here probably because you want to listen something about the experience you've never had. So that's, I think, at least it's some road to take and path to stick to. Though it's not the most practical, I think, but I do not have solutions on the top of my head right now to just come up.
So thank you very much, Karina. Thank you very much, Friba. I think that the discussion is can go forever, since all these points are very important, and I don't think that there is a country that women rights are not in threat. But especially in times of war, it is the last thing in the agenda. And this is the case for Ukraine, but the case for Afghanistan under the Taliban rule, it's that there are no women rights at all in this country. So I think that we should all remain aware about what's going on there, what's going on in our countries, and speak up every time that we see a woman being mistreated.
I don't know how to raise hand on Zoom, sorry, but I wanted to say thank you, Friba. And I also want to add to what Karina was saying, I think, and also to Samus's question, but probably we should do much stronger advocacy campaigns that are joined not only by women of Afghanistan or women of Ukraine, but by women generally, I think, or I mean, people generally, and I think that's when we can actually see the sustainable change also in the society, but on the regulatory level as well, especially with the work that you are doing in Paris right now. I think that we need more voices to join the cause so that it's visible that it has international support and every person from every walk of life is supporting the cause. So, and I think that what will add power to the message too.
Yeah, because as that viral video in Instagram stated, it took just 100 years for Olympic Games to reach real equality, because it started there were 0 women, and there were 4% women. And then in the end, over the course of 100 years, we came to some level of equality and equilibrium there. So I just want we get to life equilibrium a bit quicker, not just for our granddaughters to enjoy.
Thank you so much, Karina, for mentioning that. Sorry, I forgot to mention it earlier, address it earlier. So the Paris Olympic Games, they keep saying that this is the first Olympic that they have actual 50-50 gender ratio. And they also say that this is Women's Olympics. I don't buy that because the IOC has not released the actual stats, how many female and how many male exactly from each sport. Also, in the refugee team, there are 24 male athletes and there are only 12 female athletes. And you can check on their website as well for the information and how that is 50-50 gender ratio. And how can they boldly claim that if women in Afghanistan are not even allowed to play sports right now? And Afghanistan is the only country in the world where education and sport are systematically, formally banned for women. So unless they actually release the actual stat and they fix the problem, the gender problem in the refugee team, I don't think it makes sense for them to claim 50-50% gender ratio. It looks very nice for their PR. It sounds really nice, but as viewers, as community members, as people who support, we have to be critical and ask them to give us the real information.
Yeah, that's what I suspected, that probably the ratio is not that very fancy, and we don't know all of the like behind the doors decisions and like what really went on, and maybe who didn't qualify, who qualified, who was just not allowed to qualify and stuff, just to make this beautiful statistics, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. And if I'm not wrong, I think on the opening ceremony there was no women on the boat from the Iraqi team. There were only like 6-7 men, no women. So those are the details that I paid attention during the opening ceremony.
Yeah, I assume that because also from the Greek team, from what I know, most of them are men. So I assume that there are many women from America, from the United States, or other very liberal countries, that they somehow overturn the statistics, but it's for sure not a 50-50 participation in the games.
I also like the idea of spending more time with each other and helping the Afghan community and the Ukrainian community to integrate with each other's culture and history more, because the more we understand, the better we are prepared to have friendship, because friendship is very powerful. And when there's war and women's rights are violated, nobody wins. When there is no gender equality, when there's violence against women, nobody wins. It's not good for the current politics. It has never been in the history, and certainly it's not good for the young generation who are learning about war and about women's rights and gender equality.
So right.
Does anyone have any other questions that you wish to ask? Tanya is sharing some feedback and thoughts.
Friba, and what about you? Now you're staying in Paris for the whole time of the games?
Sort of. I'm staying until Thursday, until August 8th. And then I'll go back to Canada. I'm staying a bit longer because I had a few meetings scheduled for me to meet some important people. For example, tomorrow I'm meeting with the president of the French NOC, National Olympic Committee, who has been helping the female athletes, and also he's a big part of the decision maker for the current Olympic. And we are meeting the refugee team tomorrow at 3 p.m. Paris time. As well. And I'm meeting a couple of people from Human Rights Watch in New York. Yeah, and I have a couple of interviews. Yesterday, I had an interview with Deutschland Funk, and I have a few more interviews scheduled. So we have to keep. Thank you. We have to keep the advocacy going, and we have to keep spreading the word because in Afghanistan we say that the power of people is the power of God. So the more people we have, the more power we have. And the reason that I am working day and night to equip Afghan girls with the education and through sport, because statistically the number of Taliban fighters are small. They're just violent and they have weapons and they are very loud about it. So statistically, we have more women in Afghanistan than the Taliban fighters. So if we educate and empower the women and girls in Afghanistan, we will certainly win the Taliban and the Taliban regime. And I strongly believe that the principles of human rights, democracy, and women's rights are stronger than men with the guns. We have to equip those women with the education and the right power.
Definitely. And if we can also share some of the work that you do, or if we can support anyhow, let us know. We are a small and growing community, but we are, I think there is a lot of people who are very passionate and who will be able to, and who will be very happy to join the cause.
Yes, absolutely. I will share my website here with everyone. It's very simple. It's womanleaders.ca. We have educational programs. We have scholarship programs for women in Afghanistan to come to Canada and study. And we also have Chai and Chat. It's Chai and Chat, where we invite a guest speaker from Afghanistan. It's usually a young woman from Afghanistan to speak, tell a story, show her art, tell us a poetry, read us a poetry. And we recently had one. For the next one, I would love to share it with you, invite you also. You can come listen directly from young one from Afghanistan, speaking about Afghan culture, showing Afghan culture, history, and just meet those young, amazing women who are fighting the regime with the through education and very peacefully.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
And I agree what people say in the comments. Sorry if I mispronounced Tasneem, I guess, says that we all should do our part, and that small steps, we should never underestimate the power of small steps. You never know where this path of like 10,000 steps will go and to what it can develop. So just we need to believe in ourselves and in our power to be able to reach things. And I guess if no one else has questions, we can wrap up, go have some think about what we've learned today and have some nighttime tea for those who are in like European time zones, practically everyone. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you, Friba, and to be a moderator for this event. I thank you for the audience who came and supported us in this discussion. So I hope we'll meet again soon on some of the Generation Ukraine events or on events that are organized by women's leaders, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. It was absolutely my honor to be here, speak with you, meet Karina, Julia, Timus, and all the people in the audience. Tasneem, thank you so much. She has always supported women's rights, and you participating today. You did your part. You came, you showed up, and you listened. And I would love to continue this beautiful friendship. And I believe that working together, we will achieve something beautiful and something great that will last forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Friba.
Thank you, Friba. Thank you, Karina, so much. Thank you, Julian. Thank you for everyone else who's here with us tonight. I hope that this event will be the initiation of a long road together as we advocate for women's rights, for Ukraine, for Afghanistan, for all countries and Indian people.
Have a wonderful day, night, everyone.
And enjoy your time in Paris, and good luck with the meetings.
Thank you. They're a couple, but yeah, thank you so much. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.